So today I want to give you a little bit of insight into when you go to look for an attorney, specifically for real estate syndications, raising capital, investment funds, setting up a fund, private equity, hedge fund, whatever it is, any kind of securities attorney can give you a little bit of insight in what to look for. Now, although I am a securities attorney and I've been practicing over 20 years, this doesn't just apply to if you were to meet with me. It's what would I look for in anyone that I talk with. So let me share my screen and let's go over it. Okay, so what do we look for in a securities attorney? So first of all, you have to realize that there are a lot of complex laws in dealing with securities, syndications, and funds. It's not just a matter of, hey, I want to go raise some money or put together a fund. Can you help me do that and set up some entities? There's a lot more to it. You have to deal with the Federal Securities Act of 1933, the Exchange Act of 34, on two different levels, the Investment Advisors Act, Investment Company Act, and then there's general corporate and tax and each state law compliance issues that the attorney has to look at. Now, one question, pretty common question I get is where should they be located? So securities law generally is covered by federal law, which preempts most state law. So when you're doing a private raise of capital under what's called Reg D, which is the most common, Rule 506, typically that's a federal regulated statutory scheme. So that's basically on the federal level. So anyone who's licensed to practice in any state can practice federal law. So they don't necessarily need to be in your state. There are state-specific laws that could apply. And some of that comes down to, do you want to be able to meet with them in person? But they don't necessarily have to be in the state where you're located or where your project is located. Some of the initial factors to consider, one of the biggest things I think are more personal factors. Do you get along with them? We hear all the stories about asshole lawyers and, I hate that person, I can't deal with them. Then don't hire them. You should not. There's plenty of attorneys out there. So if you don't get along with them, it's obviously not going to make for a very good working relationship. So that is a huge factor in, do you feel like you can trust them? Do you feel like you can communicate with them adequately? Do they seem to understand your business? When you tell them what you're doing, as a securities attorney, we have to explain, typically in a PPM or your disclosure document, explain your business plan and understand all of the risks involved so we can adequately disclose that to investors. And if they don't have a clue what your business does, that could be a little bit of an issue because they may not understand all the potential risks they need to disclose. Doesn't even mean that they have to be an expert, but you should get the sense that they have some kind of understanding of what you're doing in your business. Ask about the timeline and the process. Okay, what are you going to be preparing? How long does it take? What all's involved? What do you need from me? So you can get some expectations of, okay, typically I tell people it's 4 to 6 weeks from start to finish for a typical syndication, setting up entities. I walk them through exactly what we're going to be doing during that time frame. Obviously ask about legal fees. I tend to, we typically do flat fees on most deals because I generally have a good idea how much time is going to be involved. Hourly billing is okay, but sometimes that can lead to problems with not just overbilling, but expectations. So you set a budget of $5,000 or $20,000, whatever it is, and all of a sudden they've done all this extra work and send you a bill without really telling you that they've gone way over that budget. So try to ask at least if they'll give you a flat fee or maybe a cap on the total amount or something so that you have a better expectation of how much it's going to cost you in total. Obviously, their experience level. Give me some examples of what you've worked on, how much of it that you've done. So, like last year, I helped clients raise over $450 million in about 56 different offerings in 2022. So I can tell people, here's how much I've done and here's what I've done. And that's just in the last year. I can go back through my history, but ask them for specific examples. Obviously, there's confidentiality issues. So they might not be able to tell you exactly all the specifics or the client name, but they should at least be able to give you a general idea. So here's a few questions you could ask them. How many PPMs, private placement memorandums, have they personally prepared? How much capital have you helped people raise over the last year, over your career? Have you done any public securities filings with the SEC other than a Form D? So they don't necessarily have to have done public company filings like 8Ks, 10Ks, 10Qs that are filed with the SEC. But if they have, that at least lets you know they're used to dealing with the SEC. They're used to preparing things that the way the SEC likes them disclosed. And that's very helpful. And are they up to date on any changes in the law? You'd be surprised at how many times people come to me and say, hey, can you just take a look at this? Or I used this the last time when I raised money. And you go through the documents, and whoever the attorney was used the old definition of accredited investor, which was changed many years ago. And it might not have a huge impact, but it just shows that the person maybe isn't necessarily an expert in that area to know that that law changed or the rule changed many years ago. A few other factors with some sample questions. How long have you been doing securities law? And be specific. How much of your current practice is securities law related? They might say, well, I do litigation half of the time, and I do a little bit of securities law, or I form corporations, or I do wills and trusts. Understand, how much time do they actually do on securities law? Because you want someone, it's a very specialized area. You want someone who knows what they're doing. Have you had to deal with the SEC or any state regulators? So it's not a requirement, but anyone who's had to deal with responding to various requests from the SEC or state regulators has a better understanding of what they're looking for. So the SEC, a lot of times it just takes a simple response to satisfy a regulator. And if they've never done that, they may not understand what exactly they're looking for in your disclosures. Here's one that I see sometimes. People will argue with me, oh, well, do I really have to file blue sky filings, which are state securities notice filings? It costs a lot. There's filing fees. Some states are over $1,000 just to file in. Some are $500, so it can add up in a hurry depending on where your investors are located. If the attorney says, oh yeah, we don't have to worry about those, they're not a securities attorney. They don't know what they're doing. If you're doing a Reg D private placement, it's very clear that even though it's the federal law preempts state law, and blue sky filings is very clear under Reg D that you still have to file your state notice filings. Another example is kind of a trick question. So I heard Rule 505 is good for up to $7 million in capital raises. Is that true? Well, it's a trick question because anyone who's been around for a number of years would know 504, 505, and 506 have been around and used to look a lot different than they look right now. So over 10 years ago, 505 allowed you to raise up to $5 million with very specific conditions. 505 has been eliminated. It no longer exists. So it's kind of a trick question, but gives you a general idea. Have they been around the securities industry long enough to understand all the changes that have occurred? And obviously you can ask them about their background. Where have you worked? Who do you partner with? Like, who sends you business? Do you work with other CPAs? Do you work with investment bankers? Who do you work with that trusts you? So get an idea who their network is. Ask them if they have any free educational materials or content, just to generally help you understand what they do better. If you ask an attorney, what other practice areas can you help me in? And they start saying, I can write you a will, and I can help you in litigation, and I can draft you a contract, and I can handle your divorce. That's a little concerning because you want them to focus just on securities law or primarily. So if they're doing a million other things, that's great, but it might not be the person you're looking for because you need someone specialized. Also, sometimes people will say, oh, well, I've got my other attorney, my real estate attorney. I think he can probably do it. He might be able to, I don't know. But just be careful because you want to make sure they have sufficient experience in securities law. Also, one tip, don't ask for investor intros. Don't come to an attorney and say, someone you just met, and say, hey, if I hire you, you can help me raise the money. You can introduce me to some high net worth people that are going to put money in. Don't do that. First of all, I don't know you. I just met you. If I would even make an introduction, I'd have to trust you and trust that whoever I was referring wasn't wasting their money on a project that didn't make sense. So over time, yes, attorneys could potentially refer you to investor introductions down the road, but I'm not going to make any kind of introductions and make me look bad, somebody that I don't even know, or their project doesn't make sense. And any attorney that tells you, hey, if you hire us, don't worry, we're going to introduce you to this huge network of people and you'll have no problem raising $10 million in a day. Be cautious of that because they're probably just trying to sell you on their business. All right, that's just a little bit about what to look for. And so hopefully that's a little bit helpful. And we will talk again soon. Go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And thanks for watching.